Hello and a warm welcome to everyone to this second International Best Practice live session as part of the Tourism Recovery Program. My name is Simon Reuter. I'm a program manager with NPACT and I'm joining you today from Berlin, Germany. We've had quite an exciting weekend here in Germany with general elections, so everything's in a bit of an upheave today. But I would really like to know how everyone is feeling today. So please take to the chat and post an emoji of your current state. How are you feeling? How are you doing today? I'm also going to do that. So I think I'm going to share a really happy smiley because I'm really happy that we're all here today. Seeing more happy smileys. I'm seeing a clown face. Okay, some excited eyes, a lot of smiles. Yes, a lot of excitement. Someone's feeling nerdy today. I like that as well. Good. Okay, I'm seeing only happy faces. That's a good sign. And you have every right to be excited because today we have a great session planned for you on the focus topic of digitalization. By now, I'm sure that all of you have had an opportunity to work through the online course provided on Atingi on digitalization. Digitalization these days is anything but a niche topic. The internet and social media have changed tourism and the tourism industry fundamentally. And if you as an entrepreneur want to build a company that is up to the challenges of the 21st century, to go digital is an absolute must. This is why today we have invited three great experts with a lot of experience working at the intersections of tourism and digitalization. But before you get to meet them, it's my great pleasure to introduce my co-host and my colleague from the TUI Care Foundation, Lotte Küssemann. Lotte, over to you.
Super, thank you so much, Simon. Yeah, and also hello and a warm welcome on behalf of the TUI Care Foundation. My name is Lotte, I'm a program manager at TUI Care Foundation, also based in Berlin. And we really believe that a digitalized tourism sector must innovate, generate new business opportunities to ensure continued competitiveness, growth, but also sustainable development of the sector as a whole. So I would say get ready for an insightful session on digital transformation, innovation, online marketing, tools and different strategies in tourism. And as Simon already mentioned, therefore we've invited our experts today from TUI and also our rider network today. So what are we exactly going to do? We will have like a 40-50 minutes expert session where the experts will share interesting highlights and cases from their long-standing professional experiences. They will share some tips and tricks with you on how to benefit from modern digital tools. And at the end of the session, you will have the opportunity to ask questions as well. But before we dive into the session, I'm really happy to present our experts. And of course, a really warm welcome to all of you today. We have Marijke Slaats with us, Peter Ulwan and Paul Bennett, who are highly experienced on the topics of digital transformation and digital marketing. So maybe let's start with Marijke. I know Marijke is an experienced marketing lead working in the leisure, travel and tourism industry. She is really skilled in creative leadership, content marketing, business strategy and analysis, project management, PR and communications. I think it's a lot, and she's currently leading a social media and content specialized team where she's accountable for the Benelux social media channel. So Marijke, a really warm welcome. And if you would like to say a few words to the participants, you're very welcome to do so.
Yes, thank you, Lotte. It's great to be on board and to hear so many enthusiastic comments and everything. I'm trying to read it, but I know I was told I wasn't supposed to do that. Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to all of you a little bit about marketing, content marketing, and social media. So I will be showing some insights later on this chat. Shall I hand over to Peter?
Yeah, I was going to introduce Paul actually next. Paul is today joining us. Paul Bennett is an award-winning former journalist turned travel entrepreneur. He currently chairs the board of Sustainable Travel International and serves as an advisor to a variety of startups. In 2003, Paul co-founded Context, a network of over 1,000 scholars and specialists who lead tours and other immersive experiences in over 50 cultural capitals worldwide. And today he'll be sharing some tips and tricks on how to take advantage of the digital tools out there with us. Paul, thank you for being here with us today. Would you like to say a few words as well?
Sure. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm super excited to chat with the group. I think my role is to kind of speak to the entrepreneurs in the room, and I'll probably get a bit sort of in the weeds and in the details with running a business, especially in a moment where so much is being changed by digital tools. So I'll try to share some practical advice and some experience from the companies that I've been involved in, and hopefully it'll be useful. Should I pass it over to Peter, or did you want to intro Peter?
I can take over from you, Paul. Thank you so much.
Okay, good.
I just needed to unmute myself. Yeah, I'm also really happy to welcome Peter Uran, who is the Chief Digital Officer at TUI Amusement. At the moment, he's leading a complete digital transformation unit of over 400 international colleagues, as well as overseeing all the systems, the tools and processes at TUI Amusement. Peter, really warm welcome to you.
Thanks a lot. I'm also super excited to be here. I'm reading in the chat there of all the fantastic places that you are from. So I'm really happy to share some insights on my favorite topics around digital transformation directly from Stockholm.
Thank you very much, Peter. It's a pleasure to have you. As you might remember from our last session, this goes out to the participants now, we will have the opportunity not only to hear these three experts speak on their field of expertise and share their insights with us, we will also have a Q&A session at the end of this event. In order to get your questions to the experts, please make use of the chat. We have a team in the back end that will filter and through these questions, we'll collect them, and then we will bring them to the experts at the end of the session. If you have a question that is directed particularly at one of the experts, please indicate so by saying, here goes out a question to Marijke, or here goes a question to Paul, here's a question to Peter, followed by what it is that you want to ask, and then we will make sure to get your questions to the experts. We have over 300 participants on the call, which is amazing, but that also means that if we do not get to answer your question right away, please still bear with us. We're going to do our best to make this as exciting as possible for everyone. Yes, and then without further ado, I think I can hand over to Peter, who will be the first to share some insights with us today. Peter, the stage is...
Thanks a lot. And I think you will share the slides, right? So I can get them up there. So as we said before, my name is Peter. I've been with TUI for a long time. So I started with TUI since 1994. I was supposed to work for 6 months and never managed to leave, actually. I've done everything. And one of the things I've been doing, I was a safari guide in Kenya, and Kenya being my favorite place, seeing a lot of you are from Kenya. So I'm really excited to showcase some of these things. Just the intro round two, I think you know TUI. So we call ourselves the world's leading tourism group. We've been around for 60 years, 400 hotels, 100 aircrafts, 15 cruise ships, 1,000 travel agents, etc. The part that I'm working for is called TUI Amusement, and that's basically everything that happens in the destinations. We have a global presence, 1,500 destinations in 49 countries. What I would like to share with you, because I have, I think, 14 minutes left now, is our story on how an old company, in terms of TUI Amusement, we're using COVID-19 as an accelerator for digital transformation. If we go to the next slide, we are on a journey. So TUI Amusement is actually as late as 2015, where TUI decided to put all their overseas departments into one, we call Destination Services. And we're managing to, being a sales and service company, taking care of all the package customers from TUI at that time, around 12 million customers. And we did that well for 2 years. 2017, our CEO, Fritz Jussen, said, it's great what you're doing, but I would like you to grow more than the 3% that you're growing. How would you grow faster? we thought as a really interesting challenge, and basically a few of us went around and trying to figure out what was happening in the tourism activity space. And simplistically, we saw that digitalization in airlines were more or less done, in hotels was more or less done, but in tourism activities, this was just the start. We had one of these eye-opener was in a fair in Las Vegas 2017, the first ever travel tech in tourism activities called The Arrival, where we realized that it's just starting, it's happening now, and we can actually be part of that arena and play for it. We went out to all the customers and clients and we're asking them, in terms of tourism activities, what are you looking for in terms of a platform? And all of them were saying three things. To be competitive in this market, you need to be easy to connect to. And I think that's valid for, even though if you're a one-man company or a big corporation, accessibility to customer clients is super important. The second thing was, if you want to be a global player, you have to have global reach, which we didn't have at that time. And the third thing is, you need to have your own unique content. Happy to have a long tail of things, but your bread and butter thing, the 80% of things you're doing, needs to be yourself. So in terms of quality, security, and customer service. We didn't have that at all because we were a service and sales in 15 countries. So we did 2 acquisitions. We were allowed to do 2 acquisitions. So we bought a competitor called Destination Management, and then we went from 15 or 16 countries to 49. So boom, we had the global reach. And then we acquired an Italian startup called Musement, based in Milan. That was a small digital platform, mainly focused in culture events more than anything else. We were using those 2 companies to come up with a new model. We call it digital operating model. And a year down the line, in November 19, we presented for a senior meeting in London the new strategy to become the leading tourism activity player in the world, going from an offline decentralized player into a digital platform. And we were just about to start that one when we heard the first news from Asia about this new thing called COVID-19 or Corona. And in May, end of May, beginning of April, as you know, in Europe, it completely stopped. So for 3 months, we didn't have one single customers. I said, I've been in TUI for a long time, so I've seen most of the crisis, everything from the 11th of September, the impact of the travel industry, to the Iraq wars, into tsunamis, into ash clouds, etc. But I never seen anything like that. In June, we realized that things will not be the same for a long time. We had a session and discussed, is there a way we can do what we're planning to do in 3 years, to do that in a faster time? So we basically said, can we do a 3-year plan in 1 year, and agree that let's try that? Because, and again, one of the learnings, the business risk was basically none. We didn't have any customers. So let's do everything we can in a short amount of time to be ready for the new normal when we're coming out in that crisis. Start with the COVID planning. We launched the now merged 3 companies into one, calling TUI Musement. We had a strategy fest. And what I would like to share is then one of the most important thing in a change program, which digital transformation is to share information as much as you can to drive engagement. Again, regardless if you're a small company or big corporation, that's valid. We introduced a new team performance system called OKRs, Objectives and Key Results. Not for this session, but maybe something for later. It's something that most of digital companies are using. We introduced something called a digital backlog, engaging with 1,200 projects around the world to fix all these things that we didn't have time to fix before. We now had time. And then in the springtime, we actually had, instead of a decentralized structure, we had one common platform. What that looks like, if you go to the next one, is a platform that, sorry, Simon, if you could go to the next slide, please, is we now, instead of having, which we had before, 193 different systems, we have one sourcing, production, distribution platform. So part what is what we had before, and part was what we bought from the Milan team. So regardless of if it's excursions or activities or tickets or transfers or multi-day tours, everything comes in through a sourcing unit, one part of the company, and then we productify it and then distribute it into different platforms that we're having. So not having anything before, in this last year now we have developed integration to the TUI app. We have an interface to the web. We have B2B APIs and many different touch points in terms of contact center. I think we did this in an enormous short of time, and it wasn't easy to be to do this thing, to do all these changes in one time, both from a people management perspective, bringing everybody along the change, but also from a system development perspective. And we are honestly still in the middle of this and still ongoing, because as you know, the crisis is still there. But from a proof point perspective, are we now more approachable to clients? Yes, TUI is by far our biggest client, but we also now have Booking.com as a client. We now have Expedia as a client. We just signed Trivago as a client as well. So the digital transformation storytelling, the case works. So how is then this relatable to you? And that's my final slide. If we go to the next slide, Simon. I have 3 takeaways in this one and 3 learnings from the transformation that we have done. And the first one is, I think it was Winston Churchill who said, do not waste a good crisis. Again, as I said, this crisis has been detrimental for the travel industry, but you can always try to use that to do something positive with it. Regardless, again, if you're a one-man company or a bigger company or a corporation. Because I have been a crisis director for a long time, and one thing that a crisis do is that it forces your mindset to focus. So in this perspective, we actually used the downtime to speed up transformation, so it goes faster. You definitely need to challenge your strategy. The things that you were doing before, will they actually work afterwards? And then you also need to execute that based on the new learnings. And I think in terms of crisis, then you basically have to take a higher risk. So we actually have as one of our key messages right now that we will try to be brave. So that's my first learning. Instead of just waiting for everything just to happen, what can you do based on your business today to change and adapt so you are actually ahead of competition when business are coming back? That is extremely important. The other part is simplify, simplify, simplify. Travel products are complex because they're a mix of selling expectations, highly passionate customers. You are working with their investments of the year in terms of people's holiday, and it traditionally have been a very offline business. When you try to digitalize this, you bring along things that you've been doing for all good reasons in the last 15, 20 years, maybe, if you're an old company, that you want to bring into the digital part. That will not work. So before you actually move into a new tool or a new system, whatever you want to try to do it, see if you can do simplifications. Do I really need to do that? Is there a better way to do this? Because then the now I can't even speak. The digital transformation will be a lot easier. When I did this in the Nordics, when we went from offline to online in terms of distribution, we had to let go of a lot of different products because they were too manual and too complicated. We had a big golf program that we said no to. We had rental car packages, youth packages, long stay programs. And we basically said that had to go because it doesn't work for us online. And that was a really, really painful process. But in the end, if the focus is digital transformation, that's what we need to do. So simplify. The third one is the digital backlog. That was something that we tried out mostly from an engagement perspective, but the outcome was phenomenal. So it sounds fancy, but it basically is, if you're going to change things and you have colleagues who work with you, use your colleagues' insight and learnings so you can engage them in the process as well. The digital transformation is for some a difficult path. Not everybody likes new tools or like to change things. And the best way to have everybody on board is to engage with them all along. So we use this downtime called the digital backlog, and these did all these things that we normally don't have time to do. It was part of content updates. We had translations. We translated all our products into Turkish, just as an example, that we didn't have before. We also had learning sessions. We tried new service routines, things that you know that you will have a benefit from, but also can have your colleagues come with you. Nowadays, just in this last, and you notice, if you watched Chris' videos, he showed you a lot of tips and tricks of things that you can use from a digital tool perspective. And just in this last 5 years, it's been an explosion of almost free tools or tools that you can subscribe into that works extremely well. If I would start, for example, Peter's walking tours in Stockholm today, I would basically do that as day one and go and find one of these new reservation technology companies, because they already have all the operational processes for you to start, and they have defined them so you don't have to do that. And they also give you very easy interfaces so you can put everything up online or connect to one of the platforms like us. With that short, a bit of context, use the crisis, simplify and engage with your team and try new things. I would like to hand over to Paul, which I think will give you a little bit more details in the things that you can do. Over to you, Paul.
Thanks a lot, Peter. I'm also super excited to see all these notes coming in the chat. A big shout out to everybody in South Africa. That's where I'm based currently. So I saw a couple of people right in there that they're in Cape Town and in other parts of South Africa. So I'm going to speak. I assume that most of the people here in the room, run their own business or work for a small entrepreneur. That's how most of the landscape of tours and activities looks like. It's a lot of small businesses operating around the world. There are a few big players, but mostly it's a lot of small businesses. And Peter mentioned before that it's also an industry, tours and activities specifically, an industry that's been pretty offline for most of its history. And I think back, Peter, I was at that Arrival conference, the first one in Las Vegas back in 2017. I think at that point, only about 20% of tours and activities were actually online businesses. Most everything was happening pen and paper offline. And I know that's changed probably quite a bit during the pandemic, but still not a majority. So I'm going to sort of kind of keep that in mind as I make a few comments. So, as was mentioned at the beginning, my background is as an entrepreneur. I started a tours and activities business called Context from scratch and grew it into a multi-million-dollar, multi-destination walking tour company, and eventually had a partial exit from that business. I still sit on the board, so I have a front row to everything, including the crisis, which has been utterly transformative for Context and for the entire travel industry. So, if you kind of back out and think, from a sort of an entrepreneur's perspective about digital transformation, and this is true really just of running your business. you know, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you kind of have to wear two hats at once. Simon, can we go to the next slide, actually? Yeah. And those two hats are the strategic hat and the operational hat. And, you know, what do I mean by that? Well, strategic thinking in a business context are the sort of the big questions, you know, why should I do something, weighing two big decisions or options against one another. You know, in this context, this digital context, you know, one big decision you might be making is, gosh, should I invest the time and money and energy in trying to distribute my travel product through the various distribution channels? And I'll talk a little bit about that. Peter, you know, mentioned TUI's role as a kind of OTA or online travel agency. You know, do I want to do that, or do I want to try to sell in the travel agent route, or do I want to invest in direct to consumer? You know, these are big decisions that one needs to make about your business, and prioritizing them and when to do the right thing at the right time, because you can't do everything at once in a small business. That's strategic thinking. And it would be great if that's all you needed to do as a small business owner, but you also have to operate your business. And operational thinking is more the, okay, how do I do it? How do I make this happen? It's very execution oriented. And it's sometimes you say it's in the weeds, you know, really being on top of the detail. And in a large business with hierarchies and differentiation, you have strategic functions and you have operational functions. But in a small business, they overlap, and the entrepreneur has to be doing both at once, sort of like walking and chewing gum, but a little more difficult. So kind of with that, you know, context in mind, I'll make a few comments just about digital transformation, digital options and roadmaps ahead. But I want you to always be thinking that some of these things are strategic decisions and some of these things are operational, meaning sometimes I have to figure out, should I do this? And sometimes after I decide that, I have to figure out how. And both of them, you know, touch your top line and your bottom line. Let's go to the next slide. So, you know, from my perspective, running a travel business, I think there are sort of three major areas of where tech and digitalization kind of impact the business. One is operations. So how do I run my business day to day? You know, if I'm a yoga studio, then that's sort of like, how do I make sure that I have my teachers and room booked and da, 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 da. If I'm a walking tour company, it's, do I have my guides? Are they available? Are they going to show up? Are people going to be there? That kind of sort of nuts and bolts of the business has been incredibly impacted by digitalization in the last 10 years. Another area is distribution. So how do I sell my product specifically through indirect channels? And by indirect channels, I mean through a travel agent, through a platform like TUI Amusement or Booking.com. You know, how do I get that out there? How much am I paying for that? How does it work? And how much does it cost to kind of build a system like that? And then thirdly, the sort of, and there's been, sorry, in distribution, there's been a ton of innovation. And we just got the timeline from TUI Amusement about how they're scaling up. And I'll talk about a few other sort of tech companies in that area. And then there's marketing. And this is largely about going direct to consumers. And there is just a panoply of tools out there, many of which are free. And there are all sorts of ways of kind of hacking marketing. And Mareike, who's going to come on after me, is going to talk about some very specific examples there of, you know, different marketing technology. So first, let me just say a few things about operations. Simon, can we do the next slide? Cool. So operational tech, you know, I won't talk deeply about this, but essentially there's a booking management system that should be at the core of your business. Now, a lot of people run their businesses on spreadsheets or paper. But a booking management system is a digital environment where you can run your business. There are very specialized types of software out there for specific businesses. So in the hospitality space, there are property management systems, so-called PMS. You have to learn the acronyms as you dive into digitalization, and this is maybe sort of the strategic side of things. Just kind of get your acronyms together. So the booking management system for hotels is called a PMS, a property management system, and there are a lot of them out there, dozens. In tours and activities, there's booking management systems or reservation platforms. Some of the big ones are Fair Harbor, Boken, Peak, Resdy. There's about 25 of them that have come online in the last 7 years. And then there are very specialized softwares, like things for scuba, dive operations. There are things for yoga studios. So, one big question you have to ask yourself as a founder of a small travel business is, how do I navigate this? How do I choose the right system? Well, one bit of advice I'll give you is today in 2021, I would buy a system rather than building it. And I'll give you an example from my own experience. When I started Context, it was 2003. There were no booking management systems for tours and activities. And we had all sorts of, problems we wanted to solve. We needed to have calendars for our tour guides. We wanted to integrate this onto the website. We had products we wanted to put up on the website. We wanted people to buy those in an e-commerce environment. So we had to build it. We built it in PHP, and then about 7 years later, we rebuilt it in Rails. And about this point in time, object-oriented programming came on. And, I did not have a tech background, and I had to become very techy over the decade that I ran Context. And I'm better for it, but it was very expensive. It took a long time, and we made a couple of big stumbles. One big stumble with custom software is when you make a change, you can often build up what's called tech debt. And tech debt is very hard to pay down. Tech debt is where you have old pieces of your software that don't talk to new pieces of your software. And so when you want to build something new, you have to go back and rebuild or fix old things. So today in 2021, with so many good booking management systems out there, I think it'd be hard for us to argue that a company under $10 million in top line revenue ought to be building their own custom software. That's my opinion. The next thing is you got to do your research. So there are some websites out there like Capterra where you can kind of get reviews of this stuff. Another area is get to know your competitors in adjacent geographies or something like that. Find out what they're using. And here, who are the good providers? Do they have good service? Another key principle is you want to own your own data. So your products, your content, the stuff that you upload, you need to be able to take that with you if you switch providers. And it's not a bad idea to do a sort of scenario with, well, if I unwind myself from Fair Harbor, let's say, what does that mean? I should point out, just in the tours and activities space, Fair Harbor is owned by Booking.com, and Boken is owned by TripAdvisor, which owns Viator. I'll talk a little bit about those OTAs in a second. Beware of take rates. So that's the percentage that the platform may take of every transaction. And sometimes these can be in excess of what you're paying a credit card processor. So it could be 3-4%. And that may be fine at first to get started, but that can become very expensive as you scale. And then another bit of advice is if you can be generic, meaning you can run your business on a platform that is widely used by millions of other businesses like Shopify or WordPress, that's not a bad idea. Those are very robust platforms with a lot of updating. and you basically offload those costs to the platform. So just a couple of specific words of advice. Okay, let's go on to the next slide, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about kind of the ecosystem here. So when you're distributing your products specifically into an OTA environment, so OTA, another acronym, stands for Online Travel Agency, and these are the websites like Booking.com, TripAdvisor, the TUI Amusement app, Get Your Guide, where people can buy, and then in hospitality, it's like Airbnb and places like that, where people can buy travel products. All of these interfaces, or at least up until recently, they all allowed you to kind of upload manually, but more and more, they want you to go through some kind of an API. So this is where your booking management system comes into play. So if you're using one of those, again, in tours and activities, if you're using a Booking, for example, you will enter all of your data, all your products, everything in there, and then they will feed it via an API to all the different distribution partners that you might want to sell through. And then via that API, you get back the booking details and the payments. Now, a couple of key things here is that real live inventory, last minute availability are the sort of holy grails here. So TripAdvisor, Booking.com, Get Your Guide, I assume TUI Amusement's the same way. They want availability up until the time of the event. So if you're running a dive shop, for example, and you're going to use one of these providers and distribute through an OTA, you need to be providing real-time availability. It can't be something stale. Somebody's got to be able to buy it and get confirmed right then. The other thing to keep in mind is this stuff's not free. So you're going to pay a commission to that OTA, anywhere from 20 to 30%. You can negotiate discounts with volume, but it's expensive. And the third bit to kind of share is that merchandising matters, right? So if you're going to put up a travel product, let's say it's a tour of the Forbidden City in Beijing, and you have terrible photos and you call it, Forbidden City Tour or something else unimaginative, you're probably not going to rank really well in that OTA. So some of your expertise of merchandising that you might use direct to consumers, like with SEO, this kind of thing, having great images, great descriptions, a snappy title, that stuff really matters when you get into this environment. Let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So this is the last thing I'll kind of end on, and then I'll be around to offer any other insights in Marike's talk, because she's going to pick it up from here, is basically the marketing tech toolbox. So this is the stuff that you can use, the tech tools you can use when you're going direct to consumers. And I sort of think about this, and there is a lot to talk about here, but I sort of break this down into 3 different categories. So you have technology that allows you to acquire customers, right? So that's like things like SEO, paid advertising on Facebook or Google, which is sometimes called SEM. SEO is search engine optimization. So that's making sure your website is going to rank on Google for some kind of a keyword. And then paid ads, like I said, Facebook, Google. Google's sometimes called SEM, search engine marketing. And then content marketing. So, publishing things on your blog. These kinds of things they bring traffic onto your website, they bring customers in, generally speaking. And these categories all sort of overlap. And then there's brand marketing, where you can kind of elevate yourself as a brand locally. And this is an area where I think small businesses have a distinct advantage over very large businesses, because you will find yourself competing against large businesses. For example, if you buy a Google ad, if you're a tours and activities provider and you try to buy a Google ad, again, I'll use that example of the Forbidden City Tour, you try to buy that ad, you will find that Get Your Guide and Viator and Klook have all bid that the cost of that ad up pretty high. It's going to be hard to compete there. But where you can compete is you are a local brand with lots of knowledge on the ground and lots of content. So your blog and your social feed and your ability to talk to the media and influencers and share with them the magic of your place and what you do there, it's unparalleled. And the big guys really can't compete against that. And then the third kind of bucket that I think about is life cycle marketing. And this is where you have a customer already. They've signed up usually on your newsletter list, your email list. And now you want to market them to either bring them back to your business or nurture them before they come back to your business. So this is where email drip, which is kind of a system of automated emails, and then also content, again, helps to kind of create a connection between people who already know about you and increase your brand identity. Again, these things all sort of, interweave with one another. And I think this is an area where small businesses have a sort of distinct advantage over large businesses, especially in areas where it's about your own brand and your local knowledge. So I feel like I just said a lot. Hopefully it was cogent. I'll step back. Oh wait, sorry, I had one more slide. Yeah, this is a good way to kind of cap it off. So just a couple of kind of first principles or core principles for marketing. First of all, although this stuff can feel very overwhelming, it's not that hard to get smart about it. There are courses on platforms like Udemy and Coursera, courses in how to do social marketing, how to do paid advertising that are actually quite affordable, and you can get smart really fast. The other thing that I would say is as you get into digital marketing is always remember you have to measure what you're doing. You may think that some post on Facebook is going to, really be great, and you'll put it up and nobody will like it or whatever, engage with it. And that's important. And you want to really measure everything that's happening. You can get smart at measuring. I would urge everyone to get Google Analytics certified and really be on top of your website metrics. And then, sort of a corollary of Peter's point about, simplify, simplify, simplify. In marketing, I would say test, test, test. So put something out, see what happens, see what works. Whatever doesn't work, throw it away, and what works, keep and go deep on. And the user is the queen here, right? So she will decide what she likes about your marketing and what she doesn't like, and you want to throw away the stuff she doesn't like. So with that, I will step back and turn it over to Mareike. And Mareike, feel free to call on me if you'd like me to add anything else to the social to the marketing.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. Yeah, I guess what my part now is going to go into a little bit more detail on the marketing side of things, because generally we talk about marketing a lot. We talk about digitalization and tech and everything, and then it's nice to see how does that really translate into some real examples. So that's what I'm going to try and do today, is to give you some more practical tips and tricks and examples of how you can use or how you can develop your social media campaign or some content development, etc. So I was wondering if we could have the slides up, please. So let's start with the most complicated slide first. Basically, what I'd like to tell you with this slide is how do we look at marketing at TUI. We work with a lot of different teams, a lot of different specializations, and sometimes we get a little bit lost in each other's translation or in each other's languages, because how you talk about paid advertising might be slightly different than how you talk about influencer advertising or PR or content. So with this slide, I basically wanted to provide you a framework to kind of get an idea of like, okay, so what am I doing and when am I doing it when I'm developing a campaign? So at TUI in the Benelux region, we are using like a touch, tell, sell, care framework. It's a little bit like the AIDA framework. There's a lot of different kind of communication frameworks like this, but we've kind of developed it into certain categories, so it makes it easier to see like, okay, when is something successful and when is my marketing not successful? So if we start off with the top one, touch, our goal for touch is to get attention. So basically, we're not too worried about how many clicks we get. What we want to get out there is our name and our brand. Next to the goal, we have a line of KPI and metrics, and this is to give you an idea of like, okay, so to latch back onto what Paul said, you want to test and measure everything you do. So you want to know everything that you did was this a success or not? So on this side, we would be measuring top of mind awareness or unaided awareness. This is usually done through tests online, or we ask people. We have questionnaires. And the messaging that we put out there is usually around brand. So anything that has to do with travel and TUI, generally you want to bring out that brand. You might know this from other brands as well, like Coca-Cola. You know, they're really good at getting their name out there, and that's kind of the top layer where you would be focusing on. On the last point, on the media side, is kind of giving you an indication of where what sits in terms of media channels. And the interesting thing is that, I mean, for example, television and radio, you would put that in a touch layer because you want to reach as many people as you want. For social, you can use it on all layers, and that's what I really like about social and this PR content side, is that it's very flexible and adaptable, and that kind of hooks into what Paul said earlier. These type of tools are quite cheap and quite efficient to use, and you can use them in all layers. So that makes it really interesting, and especially for smaller businesses, I think it's very useful to have this kind of to use this to the maximum if you can. So then moving on to the second one, the tell layer, and I think this is probably from like a smaller business, one of the most interesting things is the creating interest and desire for your product. So you'd then be looking at KPIs or metrics around consideration. So are people engaged? How long are they on our website? How many people click? Do they click onto the next thing? Are they maybe coming back within the next 30 days? So basically you're moving from the I like your product to I want your product. At TUI, we call that a lovely crafted holidays designed around you. So basically we can talk about our product and how amazing it is and what it can do for you. And in this field, in this tell layer, there's a lot of different tools that you can use. So I mean, radio and television, you could, but it's quite expensive. But you can go on to like more online focused tools, name it programmatic, social, branded content, blogs, websites, influencers, CRM, your mailing. It's a great way to kind of get your touch base with your customers. And at TUI, we also have retail. So if you have like offline shops or something, that's also a great place to kind of promote that tell layer of the marketing side. Then the third point is sell, and that's obviously where we're all working towards too, you know, the action. We want to sell as many tours, passengers as possible. And that's also the time when you communicate, you know, the value for money. TUI, we talk about best holiday offers, depending on what your type of business is. This is when you can really talk to people. People have already know about your brand, they like it, now they want it, and now they're ready to buy, and they want to have the best deal available. Again, social is a really nice tool for that. You could use it like a digital performance or retargeting type tools. CRM works really well and retail obviously as well. And then moving on to the last one, which is really important as well, is care. Basically, those customers that you've brought in through the funnel, you want to make sure that they're happy and you want them to stay, because it costs you then also less in terms of acquisition to get them to buy with you again. So these are your repeated conversions or your repeated revenue, and you want to stay top of mind with this group of people, that you want them to like you, and then to be sure that whatever holiday they're looking for, they can come to you. At TUI, we have a huge web services team that obviously supports all the bookings, etc. But what we also see, what we use quite a lot is social community, and I think again from a smaller business perspective, that's also very interesting. If you have fans or people that are engaged with your brand, then that's a great way to get that conversation going, to ask them what they like, what they don't like, if they want to share their pictures of their holiday. Maybe they want to ask their friends or tag their friends along. So it's a great way to get that engagement going. So this is just from a high level to give you an idea from a marketing perspective. What do we look at, and when is something valued as a success? So for example, if you're doing a marketing campaign around the awareness level, yeah, it's nice that you're going to have sales, but it's not necessarily your main focus. And the same thing for the other way around. It's just really good to be aware of those things, so you don't, so that when you're looking at return on investment, you're actually looking at the right things. So if we go to the next slide. This is just an example, and I really like the fact how Paul suggested that, as a small company, there's a lot that you can do when it comes to social PR influencers. And I think this example shows really well how you can do that from an awareness perspective. So basically at TUI, during the Corona times, last year in February, there was a big election in the Netherlands, a political election. And the sentiment around travel was really negative. No one was allowed to travel anywhere. There were no bookings. We weren't able to spend any money from TUI in terms of, big advertising campaigns. But there was definitely this need to be aware, so that, people would look at TUI in a more positive light, rather than only the negative stories that were going around. So to kind of, turn things around, we set up a one-issue party, which was called the Party for the Holidays, and try to bring some positive vibe to our fan base, but also to a broader audience. We started off with Facebook, which is the first post you see on the left-hand side. And basically we asked people, we said, are you ready to vote for the next party? It's the holiday party. And they could just like the button and vote on it. But obviously that wasn't the only thing that we did. We took it much broader than that. So we went on Instagram. We had about 20 to 25 influencers. We briefed them about the party, the holiday party, and how we wanted to, create a more positive vibe around travel, and they started sharing that with their people. So it was something that grew and grew. And from there, we talked to our other marketing colleagues who were doing the offline buying of billboards, and they said, how about we strategically place a couple of billboards around the area where people are voting, and also where the politicians are, to create more awareness for this campaign. Our communications department was also highly involved, and they started talking to journalists and sent out a press release. And before we knew it, we had like 8.5 million people that we reached, over which 30% was reached organically. And that was done because we were basically jumping in on a really political event, and luckily holidays makes people feel good. So that was a great way to kind of get our message across in a fun and exciting, enjoyable way. Just for your information, we had about 50,000 votes at the end of it. So that was quite successful. And we even got awarded for a Golden AMA Award, which is like the Dutch marketing Oscar, I'd like to call it. So it was a really successful campaign. And I think this isn't limited to big companies. I think smaller companies can do these kind of actions as well, and you can get fantastic results. If we go to the next example, this is like an easier example. You don't need to have a fantastic, great idea or a concept. This is basically based on holiday giveaways. So at TUI, we have quite a big fan base. So we have a lot of fans and people that are within our database. And the cost of acquisition of getting new customers is quite costly. So what we do in some situations is that if we know we've got a good deal going on or their last minute sales, we will go and talk to or like communicate with our fans or the customers that we already have, because that just is just a lot easier. There we call them our hot leads or our warm leads, so they're already there and or have already bought with us, so it's easier to convince them to buy with us. What we did in this campaign was basically we gave away holiday vouchers worth of 250 euros for a period of like 4 or 5 weeks. And we asked people to upload their most enjoyable holiday photos on social media. And it kind of generated this buzz because people were getting excited and tagging their friends and tagging TUI. And before you knew it, you know, you had this kind of wave and vibe going on. On the left-hand side, you'll see the Facebook post of our customers, and basically we reposted their post as well, which showed a lot of engagement. Then the second one is an influencer post. So we had a couple of influencers that we work with, and they posted about this. Usually they like these kind of things because it gives them something to give to their fans as well. So it's a win-win situation. And then we also used paid advertising to kind of push this action along further, so it could be, you know, a bit broader and more people could get to know about it. This type of campaign, I mean, it didn't have the 8.5 million reach that we had in the previous one. It was a lot smaller, between 3 and 4 million. We had about 750 photos that were shared during that period. But it was a great way to get our last minute offer under the attention of our fans and customers, and to really get them engaged and start booking their holidays. So that was a lovely way to kind of do this kind of thing. And again, I think from like a smaller business, these kind of things are quite good to do, especially if you have, you can't give away big things, but you can give away a discount or something, or you can work with a partner who maybe has a big customer base. There you can also maybe do these kind of things, could really help you engage with customers who are willing to learn more about your product. Okay, let's go to the last example, and this is sales, and I think is one of the most important things probably for everyone, especially if you go lower down in the funnel. Yes, you can definitely work with offers and do paid advertisement, but what we do at TUI as well is we kind of like to jump in on the trends that we see happening at that time. So for example, here we had the insight that on SEO, we saw that there was a high interest for warm winter destinations at the moment. So what did the team do? They basically made blog posts for every single month of the year. So where is it warm in October? Where is it warm in November, etc. And this brought in a lot of traffic. And once we get the traffic, it's easier to retarget your customers. But we didn't just do that on the blog, because we saw this trend was wider. So we said, right, let's have a look. What can we see on social? And in social, we saw the same kind of conversations. So there again, we tried, you see this jackpot thing. It's kind of like a gimmick, and people really like on social to play games and these kind of things. So if you can play into a feeling, people are looking for the sun, it's been raining all day, these are fun things to play around with. And next to that, sharing pictures, for example, on social media works really well, especially if you ask people to share their pictures as well, or tag someone, and there you go, then you have a big conversation and people get interested and go and have a look on your website. The important thing is with this kind of communication is to also follow up with some kind of action. So that's the post that you see on the right hand side. You don't just want to have the engagement. If you just have the engagements, it's nice, but people are not going to maybe not move into action or buy your product. So you want to be able to kind of show them something like a discount or something to get them into that action mode and to follow up on the conversation you basically had before with them. So this is just a quick overview of different ways of how you can use social media and content within your marketing mix. If I can just give a couple of pointers is to make sure that you really think about, before you start doing something, what is it that I want to achieve and how am I going to measure it? Like Paul said before, it's really important that you know what you want to achieve, so you can actually say this campaign was a success or not, and then you can also compare it to campaigns that you've done previously. I don't know, Paul, maybe you have some other tips from your side that you've seen within the travel market?
Well, one thing, and you sort of hit on it in one of your campaigns, that is just gold in travel marketing, is when you can get user-generated content, sometimes called UGC, another acronym. And there's a company I advise called Pack Up and Go, which is a surprise travel agency. I don't know if you know it. I've ever heard of a surprise travel agency, but they basically, you sign up with them and you describe who you are. They plan a trip for you. You never know where you're going until the day you leave. You get an envelope and they say, don't open this till the day you leave. You open it up and it's a ticket to fill in the blank. So it's a great product because people are surprised and enthusiastic. And they, they were doing really well for a while. And then they decided to put into the packet like a little flyer to help people, encourage people to share socially and tag them. And it just transformed their business. And they've had a couple, it's hit or miss. I have a lot of people who share their trip, like, oh, here I am, pack up and go. And oh, I know what it was. They had also this great little kind of a caption box that you could hold up while you took your selfie of yourself and the destination. And that, empowered people and kind of lubricated the process. And they had a bunch of people who posted, and they had thousands and thousands of followers. And they had no idea that this would be the case, but it just had an incredible impact on their business. And it was a very small tactical thing that they did, but it moved the needle.
Yeah, completely agree. I think with influencers, I've seen that happen quite a few times as well. If you work with influencers or get your message out to the press, you can just have a whole bunch of new followers or more interest for your product. It's really, really interesting to see, and you don't have to spend a lot of money in order to do that.
One other thing I might add as well is you'd mentioned on one of your slides about SEO, search engine optimization, as a way of bringing new traffic in. That is a piece of digital marketing that I think a lot of people overlook, and you really shouldn't. I think it's kind of table stakes. It's a thing that you've got to do. You have to do it well. You should know the keywords that you're going after. You should make sure that your site is optimized. And Google has a whole checklist for this. They tell you, they want your site to be optimized for SEO. It's not really a game. So you have to put some time and energy into learning that checklist. And there are technical aspects around making sure that your site is, performing fast and has all the tags on it. And then there are more sort of creative content aspects of it, that you are going after the right keywords and you're optimizing for those keywords. And the thing about SEO is that it's a slow game. It's not, you don't do SEO and then the next day, you're counting your rand. It's something that pays dividends down the line. But if you do it today, 24 months from now, you could have a stream of organic traffic. And in marketing, you said the campaign before, you talked about organic traffic and you just kind of moved on from that. But let's just pause for a moment. When something's organic, it means you did not pay for it. So you have a cost of acquisition of zero, more or less. I mean, SEO is not free. You do spend some time and money on it, but it is a lot cheaper than buying that position through advertising. So an investment today, huge dividends down the line with SEO.
Yeah, completely agree. It's one of those things that can bring in, a stream of traffic that you can just capitulate on later on. The only thing is that if you're working with investors or people that want to see results now, it's not going to give that. So it's always like finding a balance between, okay, maybe I put like some of my budget in paid and some of it on the long-term marketing investments, and try and make a trade-off, what works best.
Absolutely. But, one thing, you mentioned investors. If you do have investors or you're looking for investors, there was a comment in the chat about investment. Boy, if you have a robust organic channel for your business, that investors love that, for all the reasons that I've said before. One of the things I could talk all day about SEO because it was a big channel for context, still is today. One thing I would say is be very careful about it. I had mentioned before about building your own software, as we did at Context. We made a big change of platform and moved from Ruby on Rails to a kind of single page application, AngularJS in 2015, and we lost all of our SEO in a single day. We just fell off of Google. We were essentially dead to Google, and that was 35% of our revenue in a single day, and it took us 18 months to get it back, and a lot of hard yards, as they say. So be really, really careful about platform changes, other kinds of technical changes in your site, because it can have a huge impact on SEO. I'll shut up on SEO.
Thank you so much, Paul. I think it's really interesting, and also thank you for this great session and sharing all the insights, of course, to all experts. It's really inspiring. There's a lot going on in the chat. Also, so thank you to all participants for sharing your comments and your thoughts on the topics. Please don't forget to post any questions in the chat now. It's now the time to ask our experts. But just before we move on to the Q&A, I think we're on a good time now. Then before we go to the Q&A, we will quickly wrap up the topics that our participants covered. And of course, you can still put your questions in the chat. We will be following the chat during the wrap up. Yeah, Peter, you just started the session with discussing a bit like how amusement use the Corona pandemic as an accelerator for digital transformation. You touched up on the topic how you were growing from a destination network to a digital platform. And I remember also the 3 key learnings: do not waste a good crisis, simplify, 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 and the digital backlog. And there was also a lot going on the chat about your quote, "Done is better than perfect."
Yeah, Paul touched on the challenges for an entrepreneur to be strategic and operational at the same time, and he introduced to us the core areas of digitization in his or digitalization in his opinion, which is operations, distributions, and marketing. And he talked to us about everything from booking management systems to avoiding tech debt and dependencies, but also to distribution tech and your marketing toolbox.
Yeah, and then Marijke wrapped up the session. We were talking a bit about social media, developing a social media or brand strategy. You shared the example of touch, tell, sell, and then care. You shared with us your examples of the different campaigns. You had some sales and engagement campaigns running. You mentioned that it's also really important to know what you want to achieve. Both, I think, Paul and Marijke also touched upon the user-generated content topics. Maybe just let's go to the first question we received from Moon, which is actually a question for Paul. The question is: I can see you are also a mentor and investor. Do you have any advice for those of us looking to begin the journey for finding investments? Are there any digital channels that link tourism businesses with investments? Thanks from the Safari series in Kenya.
Yeah, that I saw that question. I posted a little response in the chat. Unfortunately, there's not, sort of a central clearinghouse of, information about small businesses for investors. It's a bit of a fragmented landscape, a bit of a wild west, a free market, I guess. There are some ways to publicize your business and get the attention of investors. One technique or tactic that I put into the chat was to try to join one of these accelerator programs. Plug and Play is one, Mass Challenge has another. There are dozens of them. In an accelerator program, you have to apply to it. And if you're accepted, usually there's 8 to 12 different companies that are in the accelerator, and you spend 2 to 3 months getting mentorship and getting some advice. You have a lot of exposure to a lot of different professionals. I serve as a mentor in a bunch of different accelerators, and they have some things kind of like this environment where there's a panel discussion, and others is one-on-one. And then along the way, you also get exposure to investors. And in the end, there's a kind of pitch night where there's investors and you kind of, pitch yourself. So that's one, avenue. What I can tell you is before you start talking to investors, you want to get your company in order. You want to have a pitch deck that explains what problem you're solving and how you're solving it, what makes you unique. Investors want to know how big the market is that you're addressing, and how much of that market you think you can address. And then they want, some detailed information. I'll never forget the first time I went out to try to find investment for context, and I was talking to this, and I knew nothing about, investment and MBAs and all this kind of stuff. And this one investor said to me, I'm interested in your business. Can you share with me your financial model? I was like, what's a financial model? So I had to go get smart on that. But again, just like everything that I've kind of mentioned in my presentation, it's not rocket science. You can learn how to build a financial model, and you will need to do that before you put out, you start talking to investors. And same thing with building a deck. One of the greatest, and a lot of the best decks out there are online. Airbnb's first deck is online, and it secured them, I don't know, $50 million in financing or something like that. So I would definitely download that. I'm not saying copy it, but use some inspiration, learn how to build a financial model.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. We have plenty more questions, and here's one that occurred during the event, and I find it quite interesting because it's very precise. And this one, I'm posting this to Peter. Paul is asking, not our Paul within the participant group is asking whether TUI is currently looking to engage with any OTA platforms that are here on the tourism recovery program. I think this is also coming from the exciting acquisitions that TUI Amusement made in the past, and maybe somebody's seeing a chance there.
I think that's a good question. I mean, we are always looking for more supply, that's what we call it, unique tours in a way. And being a platform, it is super important to have the number of products. So definitely, I actually don't know who are on the program, but would be eager to understand if it could be something, and would be happy to share anything with the supply team.
Thank you so much, Peter. We do have a question for Paul again from Aiden. He said we have hundreds of products, guides, etc., but none of them in our area are yet able to package their products or have the knowledge to put themselves online. What do you think the best platform for them is?
Yeah, so I saw that question. I'm guessing that Aiden is a kind of represents a DMO, like a destination management organization. So there's probably in a region, and then there are a lot of small operators. I mean, this is one of the one of the problems that the travel industry has, which is you have small operators that are not digitally, savvy or not empowered digitally, and connecting into a platform like TUI Musement or one of the others is difficult. It's almost kind of the last mile problem of travel. What I would say to a DMO who's kind of scratching their head about this is, first of all, there are events like this. You can sponsor an event like this for your cohort and try to get them thinking about how to become digital. Like I said, it's not hard to become digital. There's a lot of ways to learn out there. And then the other thing is to pick a platform, right? I think Aiden was asking specifically, which BMS should I use? And I think I said something about Boken in there, just that I've heard good things about Boken. And I really liked Halte and the crew from Boken. But I think the way you start, sort of with the principles that I laid out earlier, is that if you're a DMO and you're going to kind of serve this up to your constituency, start researching them and figure out, which one's better than the other. And for me, what would be at the top of my criteria list would be ease of interface. Like, it needs to be super easy for these local providers to get their product on and to confirm and make sure I have last minute availability, all those kinds of that lubrication in the system. So it should be a BMS that's mobile first, and that can be used in the field by a small operator. So I would kind of lay out my asks, and then I would just, I'm thinking in terms of spreadsheet, just kind of figure out which of the platforms are best suited from a feature set perspective to address those asks.
Thank you so much, Paul. Moving on to Mareike, you talked a little bit about influencer marketing on social media, and Princess Majiki posted a question here, or more of a comment really. She said, most influencers require free trips in order to market for you, and being a small business, this can become a challenge. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because we tend to think that we only need to have the big influencers who have lots of reach. And I think that micro influencers or nano influencers, as they're called, could be really interesting for smaller businesses, mainly because they usually have a smaller community, but they have a community that's really niche or around a certain topic, which could be really interesting for your business if you have a specific tour or whatever. Next to that, they're also more interested in working like on a barter basis or on a different basis. If you have the big influences, yes, generally they will ask bigger fees and they will want probably more from you. But if you could select, instead of one big influencer, you take like maybe 5 within your audience area or within your niche, and you could barter with them maybe a free trip or something, something smaller, then that usually works out quite well, and the results are really good from those type of campaigns as well. So it's trying to be a bit creative as to how can I use it, do this in a different way.
Can I maybe ask a follow-up question there? Because I remember from working in hospitality myself, that it was a time when it was quite common for especially hospitality providers that you would receive several emails a day from self-declared influencers who would ask you about, could I have a free stay at your place and maybe, some other benefits for maybe a week, and then I'll post about you on social media. Do you have any strategies on sort of how to ensure that an influencer is worth this investment?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think is do your research. That's the most important thing. People that come to you and ask something for free generally have different interests than what you might have as a business. So you need to make sure that what you want to get out of it, suits with your or matches with your marketing needs. So usually it's then the other way around, to go and look for the right influencer that works for you, rather than the ones that come out there and proclaim that they're influencer, because you need to do a bit of research around, what is their reach? Do they have a lot of fake followers or not? It's good to kind of dive into the statistics as well. And there are a lot of tools out there where, and some of them, quite a few of them are free as well, to kind of see at least a baseline. Okay, can I see if this person who says who they are actually is the person they are, and they actually have the reach and the engagement that they're talking about? Yeah.
Great advice. I saw Paul raise his hand. Do you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, I was just going to pile in there on Ike's comment about how a small business might work with influencers. One idea is to pair up with another business in your location or two. So for example, if you have an experience, you're an experience provider, find a local, B&B or hotel, and the two of you go in on a package for influencers where you give them a free experience, they give them a couple of nights at the hotel. All the influencer has to do is fly and get there. Sometimes it takes a long time because they might not be coming to your destination anytime soon, unless you can pair up with an airline, which we've done actually at Context before. So you can create these sort of partnerships for influencers, and you share. Everybody gets a little bit of that PR.
Thank you so much, Marijke and Paul. I do have a question, I think, for maybe Marijke and Peter together. Do you think that having presence in different booking systems, such as Airbnb, TripAdvisor, among others, would help position our brands, even though they do not book any tour through those systems? As a Mexican panelist said, nowadays customers do more research before booking a tour, so they could find you through these systems and book directly to you.
Should I go first? I have a practical perspective of that. So if you use multiple platforms, I think it makes sense though. I mean, I like what the Mexican panelists did. I mean, customers, all research show now that customers are doing more research and they're going in and do that. Google will punish you though, if you're trying to spread exactly the same content into multiple platforms. So that's the downside. So the trade-off is that you will need to manage your product, but you need to rewrite text and pictures for the same product in different channels. So that's the only thing I would like to have a think around it. Is it worth it or not worth it? That's my practical, simplistic thing. Okay.
Yeah, from a brand perspective, there's this really great research done by Byron Sharp, and there's a book about how to be visible as a brand as well. It's usually for the bigger brands, but there they suggest that you need to be visible on as many places as you can, because the more easy it is to buy, the higher people will think of you, and it will convert. But that's from a theoretical perspective. I'm not an expert when it comes to platforms and knowing where to be and where not to be. So I think that what Peter said as well is very valuable, and you need to kind of make a trade-off and see what is it. You could at the same time also just do an advertisement, right? If you want brand awareness, you could also think about, how am I going to show my brand on different places? So it's, yeah, difficult to say yes or no, I think, to that one.
One thing I would just add there, you sort of touched on that, Marijke, is there's a little bit of a kind of validation aspect of being on every platform. So it's a certain amount of work